Ogerpon was a very interesting addition to the Scarlet and Violet VGC format. Being the first Pokemon that was built entirely with Tera in mind, you have a lot of options with Ogerpon, but does it have enough tools to possibly contend with the future formats with moves like Follow Me and some really impressive dual stabs? Could we see Ogerpon actually do some decent work if it was legal in a non-Tera format? Well, today you're in luck, because we have some older VGC formats that we can take a look at to see if Ogerpon could actually hold its own without having Tera involved. So we're going to compare this to VGC 2015, 2018, and the Series 9 format for VGC 2021 to see just how good Ogerpon could have been if it was legal in a Passion format. The reason I'm choosing these formats, by the way, is because they are the closest to our Regulation F format, which was the last format we had that didn't include the restricted legendaries. And so we can get a pretty good indication of how Ogerpon would compare. If you enjoyed the video at any point in time, make sure to leave a like on the video and subscribe for more. Especially make sure that you are subscribed to the channel, as less than 10% of you guys who actually watch the videos every week are, and it would be a great way to make sure you don't miss a future upload. Also, if you want to go the extra mile, consider becoming a member, as 100% of the membership money goes straight to the admin. With that said, let's get into how Ogerpon would have done, starting off with the ORAS VGC format. Before we do talk about Ogerpon, we should quickly address some very few base qualifications that we will need to have when talking about this Pokemon. With Ogerpon, I'm specifically talking about all the pre-Tera forms, as I don't really think we have a precedent to exactly say that Embody Aspect would have just been the new translated ability for Ogerpon. However, the masks are some pretty good signature items for Ogerpon, and because these came around exactly when Ogerpon did, unlike Tera not being created just for Ogerpon, we are going to carry over the masks, at least when talking about Ogerpon, as this is how you actually access the other forms anyway. Starting off with ORAS VGC though, we do have a pretty clear option for what would be the best Ogerpon form, and I think we'll start off with the worst one actually, being Teal Ogerpon. I think this is the worst generation for Teal Ogerpon by a long shot, as I don't really think it offers a lot against most common Pokemon. Because of the fact that options like Zapdos and Charizard Y were some of the best Pokemon you could run in the format at the time, and you don't really get a lot against common Intimidators due to the fact that Landorus would run a Scarf, and Scrafty just wasn't really a problem for any Ogerpon form this gen. I don't really think that Teal Ogerpon would be that great of a pick. I think the other three forms though would just strictly outclass it in this format. Ogerpon Wellspring could be a pretty good support Pokemon this generation. And starting off, we do have its water typing, which will help a lot with resisting some really strong stabs against rain teams, Calm Mind Suicune, Charizard Y, Azumarill, and also just as a really nice offensive option to hit Landorus Therian with. Water Absorb and Follow Me could be really good, as there are a lot of really good water types in VGC, such as Rotom Wash, which could actually be a big problem for one of the best teams that I think Ogerpon Wellspring could fit onto, being Japan Sand. I think on a type of team like this, where Ogerpon could benefit from drawing in any sort of water type moves that might be harming Excadrill, you could really make a case that Ogerpon would objectively just be the best fit for this type of team, and that the Wellspring form would be the best candidate for it. I do think there are other teams that Ogerpon Wellspring could have definitely fit on, but I think as far as the best archetype it would be placed onto, it would definitely be the Japan Sand archetype, due to the fact that it would be a really good redirector, and you could possibly just throw in a really good specially offensive Pokemon for that 6th slot. And I think Ogerpon Hearthling could be a really good anti-meta option as a strong fire type that could abuse the Sun from Charizard Y, while also actually harming Heatran due to the ability Mold Break. I think Hearthling would absolutely require Tailwind support to be any form of viable, as otherwise a lot of the different Choice Scarf options, Mega Salamence, and Mega Gengar would all really pressure Ogerpon Hearthling. I think the value from having good speed control though, with a really strong fire and grass stab, would be pretty difficult for this format to handle though. So I think there's some really high reward for running Ogerpon Hearthflame, but it's definitely going to be pretty difficult, especially considering Charizard Y was one of the best Megas, and Mega Salamence was still a really strong option. Now I think Cornerstone Ogerpon would definitely have a couple areas that outclasses Hearthflame and Wellspring, but it would definitely be the clear third pick, as I think Wellspring would probably be the best, and then Hearthflame is a close second. Considering the fact that Ogerpon and Cornerstone would be able to pressure both Zapdos and Charizard Y really easily, I do think there is at least a place for it in this format, as these were two of the best Pokemon you could actually be utilizing on any given team, and it wouldn't have to worry about the Sun either, which is something that Ogerpon Wellspring would have to fear greatly when handling Charizard Y. I'd say outside of teams that are really weak to these two particular flying types, Cornerstone wouldn't really be that useful in VGC this generation, but it definitely at least has a role, and there would certainly be players at high level play that would absolutely require this pick to make their teams work. As far as some issues that'll carry over into VGC 2018, we do have a couple key things, with the first two being Mega Salamence and Mega Gengar even just existing. These will pressure every Ogerpon form in the game, and they're really good ways of actually oppressing the Ogerpons entirely due to their high speed and really strong stabs that can hit them super effective. Cornerstone Ogerpon definitely is the best matchup against these two, but it's still not exactly that great due to the fact that it's just not that bulky on the special side, and both forms could definitely still just 2-hit KO it very easily. Going to Generation 7, there's going to be some other uphill battles for Cornerstone, especially being options like Stakataka, Kommo-o, which will threaten every Ogerpon form in this list, and specifically for any Ogerpon form not named Ogerpon Heartflame, the huge rise in Mega Metagross will be a very big deterrent for a lot of these. For better or worse though, the Ogerpon forms have one thing that gives them both a really huge advantage in Generation 7 and an extreme disadvantage, being their masks. Now the masks do give Ogerpon a 1.2 boost to any attack they use, which is a pretty big deal for this format as not a lot of Pokemon just had that kind of passive boost with their item. But at the same time though, not running a Z Crystal on a really offensive Pokemon was a pretty big deal. I think considering the fact that you can't utilize the Z moves for a really good one-time nuke, this will hurt Ogerpon a lot, but it's not something that can't be worked into a team. I think the increase in Mega Gengar and Mega Salamence will be a pretty big thing to overcome, and again, very much so Kommo-o's introduction at all will require a lot of Ogerpon forms to have to run play rough, which is something I didn't have to do in Generation 6. Thankfully though, Kommo-o doesn't have body press yet, so at the very least for Generation 7, it will be a lot easier to overcome, but still a huge nuisance as Clanger's Soul was very terrifying. Starting off, we'll have to look at Ogerpon Teal, as I do think that Ogerpon Teal has a few key advantages over every other Ogerpon form this generation due to the fact that you would actually get the use of Z moves, which is a really big deal. Defiant would definitely have a really good place in this format, as it could be a great partner next to options like Mega Blaziken, since these already did partner with Bisharp for Defiant, and the trio of these would handle most common Pokemon. One key thing that would do a lot against a Bisharp and Mega Blaziken duo would be Tapu Fini, and Teal Ogerpon would be an amazing way to actually just completely destroy this Pokemon. I think Teal Ogerpon would also be able to take advantage of Bulu's grassy terrain, which did pick up a bit at times in the format, and overall, it would be a very terrifying nuke for really just anything that would actually want to stop Mega Blaziken. I think if you were to throw a really good Fairy type into this team, probably Tapu Koko, you could get a lot of mileage out of this four Pokemon, and it would be an absolute staple for hyper offense in my opinion. As far as Ogerpon Teal items go, I think Grassium Z would still be the best, as that's probably the big reason you're using Teal Ogerpon over any other form, but Focus Sash would still be a good option with moves like Follow Me being some great offensive support here. Besides Teal Ogerpon though, I think Heartflame could have some decent use, as its dual stab is still really good into anything not naming a Salamence or Incineroar, but at the same time, it would ultimately fall greatly in usage compared to ORAS. I think both Heartflame and Wellspring would be the two worst forms, which is really shocking to say, because if you look at any other format, these two would be very strong contenders for the best Pokemon. At the same time though, their dual stabs are still so obnoxious, and they have a wide array of coverage with the Fire and Grass as well as the Water and Grass typings respectively, that you would be able to put up a lot of pressure. Ogerpon Wellspring would be one of the few water types that get tailored to take a hit from Z Koko, which is a really big deal, as for rain teams, this gives you a really strong nuke into it with a good water type stab, but at the same time though, you could also just use Ogerpon Wellspring as a good Follow Me candidate to make sure that you can KO it with another threat or even just get a good setup turn off. With the addition of Incineroar in Generation 7, as well as the huge rise of Charizard Y and Mega Salamence, I think Cornerstone Ogerpon would have a real contender for the second best, if not very best form in this generation, though it would need to fear a lot of fake out users in the tier, specifically Incineroar. I think at the same time, you could weirdly throw this on a really good composition with Pokemon like Tapu Lele though, and be able to check a lot of different Pokemon that this team would otherwise fear, such as Tapu Koko and Finny, that could otherwise remove your Psychic Terrain. The Psychic Terrain would benefit Cornerstone Ogerpon a lot, as well as you could avoid Fake Out very easily without needing to click Spiky Shield, meaning that you can keep your Sturdy intact much more easily. When you pair these two with Mega Metagross, it becomes a very good physically offensive composition, with Cornerstone Ogerpon and Mega Metagross hitting a wide array of Pokemon in the format, with Cornerstone Ogerpon especially being great for Pokemon that would otherwise be able to take hits from Mega Metagross. You'd especially want a good Fire type for this role, as Celesteela would probably be the best Steel type in the format that's not Mega Metagross in the mirror, so I would definitely look into the Rotom Heat role especially here, as I think it would be a very strong contender for this team. Overall, I think Cornerstone Ogerpon has a lot to offer, but I don't think it's the objective best form in this gen, though it's definitely top 2 for sure. We've now had a generation where at least every Ogerpon form has had a really strong presence, but how would these forms handle Sword and Shield? Let's just say that I think all 4 Ogerpon forms would be genuine nightmares, and I'm really glad that Game Freak accidentally left off a good flying move like Acrobatics here, or these could have very easily gotten out of hand this gen. Now let's start off by kind of redefining how Ogerpon would have to play in Sword and Shield, because it would vastly change due to Dynamax. All 4 Ogerpon forms would probably have a way to Dynamax, as I don't really see them being restricted from it, such as Zacian and Zamazenta were. So we do have a few key things that actually do come with the Dynamax Ogerpon. For starters, Max Knuckle will be a great way for these Pokemon to passively boost their offensive stats, and it's also just great coverage for Incineroar for most of these forms. Max Overgrowth would also give you a great way to set Grassy Terrain, meaning that Ogerpon could get a passive Grassy Terrain boost, even against other key terrain setters in the tier like Finny. Max Strike is still a decent form of speed control for Ogerpon, and while it's a little less reliable than Max Airstream, it is still a decent thing that Ogerpon could utilize with some really high power normal stabs in its kit. You also could even just get away with not running Max Guard through Spiky Shield, and instead just using Max Guard through Follow Me, as outside of the Dynamax, you could use this as a good redirection pick for another win con, and with Dynamax, you could just get a form of Protect out of this. I think at the same time though, with a good Max Airstream and Max Knuckle users such as Gmax Cinderace, you could make Ogerpon just a really relevant side candidate that could redirect in hits while you set up and then go for game. What else can Ogerpon actually do in this format though to make sure it's holding up? Now Ogerpon Teal is going to be our starting place here, as I think it would be exclusively a Focus Sash user this gen. With Ogerpon's Teal form, you could definitely benefit a lot from your opponents using Dynamax, but never really looking to pursue it yourself, such as how Urshifu did typically this generation. Not only would Defiant be useful for the 70-ish% Incineroar at times this generation, but also for a lot of the max moves that drop stats such as Max Darkness and Max Strike, you could definitely benefit a lot from just having an Ogerpon that would quickly get to +5 or +6 attack in a turn or two. This format also benefited a lot from prankster options like Thundurus, Whimsicott, and Grimmsnarl that all specifically were really good at benefiting teams by dropping the opponent's defensive stats with moves like Fake Tears or Scary Face that dropped speed so you could hit them first. With Ogerpon though, you wouldn't really easily be able to punish it due to the fact that its bulk is respectable enough for an offensive threat, and you wouldn't really want to safely boost Ogerpon's attack by +2, as most likely your Pokemon will die from that. This essentially gives you a really good, fast enough offensive threat that's not Rillaboom that can apply some serious pressure to an opponent with just a reliable Grass Stab. Follow Me would still be decent on this form, and I think it would be a great way to burn through a couple of your opponent's Dynamax turns by just clicking Max Guard. Now I think the other 3 Ogerpon forms don't necessarily take advantage of the opponent's Dynamax as well, but they certainly have a lot of key benefits when using Dynamax themselves. Let's start off with the masks, since while choice items don't necessarily work in Dynamax, these 3 masks actually have a lot higher value as boosting items for any Dynamax Ogerpon, as the boost is only 0.1 times weaker than something like a Life Orb would be. The best part is that unlike a Life Orb, you don't actually have any drawback to the masks, so you do get a lot of benefit out of this, and the benefit is far higher to see in a format where Dynamax is the mechanic. So I've already mentioned that Tealpon would be a pretty underwhelming Dynamax user, but how would the other 3 fare? And I think the biggest area where all 3 of these other forms of Ogerpon benefit from using Dynamax is specifically from the move Ivy Cudgel, which would essentially allow all 3 Ogerpons a way to benefit themselves by changing the weather based on whatever that Pokemon would need. For Ogerpon Cornerstone, you can instantly get a nice Spit F boost while making sure that you hit with a very powerful Rock-type stab and break through any opposing Focus Sash or Sturdy your opponent might have. For Ogerpon Hearthflame, you get a really strong way to boost the Sun by setting up a Max Flare that can benefit a lot of Chlorophyll users or even just increase your Fire Stab. And for Ogerpon Wellspring, you'd be able to set the Rain for a lot of different Swift Swim candidates, or even just changing the Sun so you take less from an otherwise neutral Fire type move, making it a very good bulky option that could still honestly just get a really powerful Ivy Cudgel off anyway. Not only this, but when you factor in that all 3 Pokemon can make an advantageous weather for themselves while still stacking boosts with Superpower and even get a nice grassy terrain for passive recovery, you can seriously make all 3 of these Pokemon into absolute nightmares. At minimum, I do think these forms would still run Max Knuckle, since they'd be a lot more susceptible to Charm and Intimidate, which were very prevalent in this generation, and Max Overgrowth would probably actually come from Woodhammer due to the fact that Ivy Cudgel would no longer be a Grass Stab with these forms. I think all 3 would be very phenomenal partners with a lot of the good Prankster users like Thundurus and Grimmsnarl for Thunder Wave support, or Tornadus and Whimsicott that gets that Tailwind very easily. But I'm very curious to see how these could have exactly done if they were legal in Sword and Shield, as I think the team comps would be so wide with these Pokemon, there's not really one specific place I think it would fit, unlike how Cornerstone Ogerpon would have fit really well in Psyspam in Gen 7, or how you could typically have seen Ogerpon Wellspring be a good fit for Sand. Overall, I think despite lacking Tera in previous generations, we could see that Ogerpon would have a lot of ways to be creative, even without Tera as the mechanic. I think while Sword and Shield it gets very close to being overbearing at times, I don't think it's exactly more broken than a Pokemon like Regieleki or Gmax Charizard was, and I think that Ogerpon thankfully lacked Max Airstream, which would have been the thing that pushed it over that edge. If you're curious about other VGC discussion on the channel for other Pokemon and how they would do in different generations, make sure to subscribe. I try and cover these videos at least once a month, as they do take a bit of time to research and really plan out how the Pokemon would do in a theorycraft setting. So if you are interested in that type of content, make sure to subscribe, as next month I'll probably have another one of these up. I think currently some ideas I have on the table are for things like Palafin or for some other Pokemon that aren't necessarily in Scarlet and Violet, but if you have any specific ideas you want to see down below, I would love to hear them, as I do take a lot of the ideas that I pick from the comments, such as Ogerpon. Also, shout out to our members. For just a couple dollars a month, the support goes a long way and it helps me get the editors at least a little bit extra income on the side. Our current members are Zeke Zero and Josh K Ultra Player. Thank you guys very much for your support, I greatly appreciate it. And if you want to get some nice perks such as emotes for the channel, or just helping out in general, make sure to click that join button down below. With that said, I'm going to see you guys next week for yet another video. Until then, peace out guys.